Hi, welcome to Claro Conversations. This is my first ever podcast, so please bear with me. um, I thought I'd make the first episode a little bit of an introduction, why this work matters to me. I'm going to share a little bit sort of about my journey without going into too much detail. We haven't got time for all of that. um, but essentially, I feel that change should be compassionate and practical. Not everyone will relate to that, but I think a lot of people will and do, myself included. Um, I think a lot of us have experienced trauma in one form or another, often from childhood. And due to previous generations' culture and the culture that we're born into, I think that it has been so normal for us to shove things down and just keep on keeping on. And it's so common to just sort of be doing all the right things on the outside whilst there's a bit of a storm brewing on the inside. At least that's kind of how I felt, even from quite a young age. um, I think it does take a certain amount of strength and resilience to be able to do that and perform in that way. But I really wanted more than that. I didn't want to feel like a slave to my brain, I guess. Having it dictate my thoughts and my feelings based on past events. Um, and that is kind of where my journey into therapy started for myself. Um, During this, I was working in an operating theatre. I worked there for 10 to 12 years. Um, and then I decided to study psychology full time as a mature student, she says, with air quotes. I think I was like 26 at the time, but I did feel quite mature surrounded by 18-year-olds fresh out of their A levels, and I was raising a 5-year-old. Um, but it just made me laugh that I was still considered a mature student. Um, but I loved psychology. It taught me so much about, particularly the things that struck me the most are the biological predispositions that we can have to anxiety and depression. Those things can be inherited. Um, the whole nature versus nurture and all of the various psychological theories there are. I think one of the things that I loved the most um, during my studies was positive psychology. For me, it just felt like there's hope. It felt less deterministic than many of the previous theories that had been discussed and developed over the years. And whilst they all have their merits, for me personally, it was positive psychology that it just got my attention. Um, I think in part because it has that kind of practical aspect to it. I've always been someone that I like to fix things or solve a problem. If something isn't quite right, whether it's very practical in terms of something's wrong with the house, or something's broken, something in my body that needs fixing, or something in my mind, I'm very rarely, if ever, content to just accept it and be okay with it. If I can solve it or make it better, then I will, and I will find a way. That's just how I'm wired. Um, and I kind of felt like in my therapy, where I'd gained an incredible amount of understanding about how my past had affected me, why I am who I am or how I became who I am. I had processed a lot of my past and the emotions attached to it, peeled back those layers, dug deep, really deep. Um, and I kind of was thinking, this is amazing, but I don't necessarily know how to integrate this into my everyday life. And then that's where I found coaching. It kind of met me where I was at. I was able to pull on the information that I'd learned through therapy about who I am, where I've come from, and use it to move forward. Initially, I thought that life coaching was purely for people that wanted to climb the career ladder. That was how I'd kind of seen it advertised, until my best friend, who is an incredible psychotherapist, introduced me to life coaching as a mental wellness tool. And I went out and I found a holistic life coach, and she supported me in taking those next steps to find my own emotional well-being. We again had like so much insight during those sessions, sprinkled with humor. We laughed a lot together and it was amazing. But I also came away with practical things that I could implement in my daily life in between sessions. And I just couldn't believe how quickly and effectively it worked. It's not about quick fixes, but having that sense of control and autonomy over my life, my wellness, and actually really feeling and seeing the difference it was making in my everyday mood and vibe. It was incredible and I absolutely loved it. So, of course, I did my own training, so that hopefully I could help other people do the same thing. And that's partly where this podcast came through. I thought that maybe I could share some tools and talk about all things wellness, from our mental wellness, our physical wellness, nutrition, all of those things I've got a huge interest in. And we are one full being, all interconnected. What we eat and what we do with our bodies has an impact on our mind and vice versa. And I wanted to create a space for curiosity and conversation around all of these things. And I guess if there are any specifics that you'd like me to cover, then please reach out. I'm kind of wanting to create awareness, choice, and compassion. That is enough to begin making meaningful change. You don't have to come in as an open book to start making changes. Small steps is enough. If you would like to reach out, I do have a website, clarocoaching.co.uk. I'm on Instagram at Claro Coaching, and you can also send me an email, hello@clarocoaching.co.uk. I hope you've enjoyed listening, and I look forward to putting more out there.